ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
I'm Frank Morano. If there's somebody that I always enjoy speaking with, it's Tony Lyons. He is the president and publisher of Skyhorse Publishing, a great publishing house that publishes everybody from Alan Dershowitz to Woody Allen to Melania Trump to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. On top of that, he also was one of the key figures behind the super PAC supporting the presidential candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was my candidate for president as well. And with RFK potentially headed to the post of Secretary of Health and Human Services, struck me as an opportune time to ring up Tony Lyons again and check in and see how he sees the world. My only beef with him is today he's on the phone rather than in studio. Tony, it's great to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on the radio.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Tony, it's been a while since we spoke. Let's catch up with how the kind of the post-mortem of the campaign. In Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s running mate had indicated that she thought that there were two paths that the campaign could face. They could be either on the Trump team, which is what they ultimately chose, and helped guarantee Trump's win, or they could have led the building blocks for a new third-party watchdog. Obviously, they chose to drop out and back Trump. What did you think of that move? Through the prism of hindsight, was that the correct move? Is that the move you were hoping for?
Yeah, that was exactly the move that I was hoping for. I think that, creating a third party at this time when there's so much corruption in Washington, D.C., so many people just really fighting the American public. So to start a third party and have that go 4 years from now or 8 years from now, it's just, there's not enough time for that. And I don't think there could have been any better outcome than Bobby Kennedy, joining with Donald Trump to fight the battles that he was born to fight. These are exactly the things that he wanted to do. Bobby Kennedy has said many times in the last couple of months that everything that he hoped that he would be able to do, he's going to be able to do in this position.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. One of the things that we're also hearing is a backlash to this nomination. There's a lot of folks that believe that with some of the things that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said with respect to public health, with respect to certain conspiracy theories, with respect to using terms like plandemic as it relates to COVID, with respect to drawing Holocaust analogies, that he's done some damage to the legacy, not only his environmental legacy, but to the legacy of his father. There was an article in The Forward yesterday, which is a Jewish newspaper, which written by someone who said that he was working on writing a film about Robert F. Kennedy Sr. and that Bobby Kennedy helped shape his Jewish values. And yet with Robert F. Kennedy having the same name and now potentially ascending to such a lofty position, that it's essentially taking a wrecking ball to the legacy of Robert F. Kennedy Sr. What do you say to those who feel that way, that were big fans of RFK Sr., not so much RFK Jr.?
So I think that what many of those people don't recognize is that they've been subjected to a level of indoctrination that is historic, and that what's happened to them, the billions of dollars that's been spent to convince them that somebody who's fighting day and night to protect them, to help them, somebody who's given up everything to fight for the things that he believes in and the things that will make this country better. It's hard to imagine somebody who would fight harder, who cares more, and who is more sincere. But, when you go up against the most powerful people on the planet and some of the most corrupt corporations in history. And, these places are colluding with corrupt government agencies, with agencies that are captured by these corporations. It's not shocking in any way that there would be a lot of people who don't understand the playbook, who don't know what's happening to them. And I just hope that those people will remain open, because I think that when they see what Bobby Kennedy really believes and what he wants to do and what he does do in that position, they're going to be so thankful that for once in this generation, they have a politician who's going to fight day and night for their health, for their welfare. I mean, these people, many of these people like Dr. Fauci, but many of the other public health officials, these geniuses, they've had their chance. And we're the most powerful and the richest country on the planet. We spend more money per capita on health care than any other country on the planet, and yet we have the worst health outcomes. So when people say they're afraid of what Bobby Kennedy might do, they should think about what that means, because the worst things, the things that they fear the most, those things have already happened. Our children are the sickest children of any industrialized country. What are they afraid of? People voted for change. This is a historic election. People knew exactly what Donald Trump wanted Bobby Kennedy to do. Bobby Kennedy has been transparent about what he is going to do in that position, and millions of people voted for him, and they voted for Donald Trump's vision. And I think that, if you believe in the peaceful transition of power, you have to believe then in letting Bobby Kennedy do the things that voters decided to give him a chance to do.
One of the things that I've heard a great deal of criticism towards RFK about is his lack of formal medical training. He's not a doctor, not an MD, not a PhD. He's a lawyer. So why should RFK have such broad authority when it comes to rewriting America's public health policies? Now, I will point out that I didn't hear one of the people that raised this question with me raising it when Javier Becerra, the senator from California, was nominated to be Secretary of HHS. But let me ask you that anyway. Is it a valid criticism that he has no formal health care training?
Not valid at all. What's going on? Bobby Kennedy has been involved in over 500 lawsuits that involve science. He's been reading science for the last 30 years. Nobody questioned him as a leading environmentalist. He was dealing with science all the time then. He was on the cover of Time magazine as, one of the greatest men on the planet for his work in protecting the environment. He's trying to do the same thing now. He's trying to protect our internal environment. He's trying to protect our children, our health, our future. Nobody should be shocked there. And going back to a point that you made before with that gentleman who's making a film, I think that Bobby Kennedy's father and his uncle would just be incredibly proud of him, that they were going up against the same kinds of people, the most corrupt people on the planet. They were fighting, Bobby Kennedy was fighting the mafia and the unions, and John F. Kennedy was fighting the CIA, the military-industrial complex. These are the same kinds of people. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is fighting in the same way against the same kinds of people. And, it's hard to see it for people who've been indoctrinated. But I think that if you really think about it, and if you remain open and give him the opportunity, you will see that he is exactly the type of person, the type of revolutionary trying to change the country in the best way possible, trying to right these wrongs that his father and his uncle were.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
The number one selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, out botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
You know, it's interesting. There was a big article in the New York Times last weekend about Bobby Kennedy, almost entirely negative. I'd say it was about 70% negative. But what struck me was the headline, Kennedy's Inheritance, How Addiction and Trauma Shaped a Turbulent Life. And I was just thinking, is there any other person that's been in recovery for decades that they would mention their addiction in the top line of the headline about the story of an HHS nomination? And the answer is, I don't think so. Democrat or Republican. I don't remember anyone bringing up Larry Kudlow's cocaine use when President Trump appointed him in the last administration. I don't remember the New York Times mentioning Barack Obama's cocaine use in their headline when he was running for president. It seems to me that there's one set of rules for covering Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on both the left, with whether it's the Times, or the right with the Wall Street Journal, and then there's another set of rules for covering everybody else. Would you agree with that?
I think that's exactly right. You know, that what you see with Bobby Kennedy is somebody who's made this kind of hero's journey, who's had a really tough life, and who's watched his father and his uncle assassinated, you know, who's gone through this incredible transformation. And it's a transformation, you know, that to a lesser extent, millions of Americans have gone through. But I think that when you can't attack somebody for their ideas, when you can't attack them for their policies, when you can't attack them for their ability to read and understand science, then you start to attack them for things that they did in the past, 30 years ago, for things that are personal. And, you know, that's a sign of weakness. These people know that they've failed the American public, and what they want to do now is try to protect their profits. And not us, not you, not me, not anybody. They just want money. And Bobby Kennedy is an existential threat to the profitability of a dozen of the most greedy and corrupt companies in history.
I want to come back to that in a second, because he's certainly going to have his hands full with respect to that one. But let me ask you about a piece that Brian Deere, who's been on this show, he's a journalist and a longtime Kennedy critic, wrote in the New York Times, I guess 2 weeks ago. I'll never forget what Kennedy did during Samoa's measles outbreak. And I've heard this criticism from others, including callers to this show. who talk about how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got Samoa to forego measles vaccinations, and it led to a horrible and deadly outbreak on the island of Samoa because of the vaccine hesitancy with respect to the measles vaccine. I'm sure you've heard about this many times. Is there any validity to that criticism?
None whatsoever. I mean, this is just another one of those stories that is twisted, that is, not honestly described. They're just looking for anything that they can get him for. We're supposed to be told that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who think that every vaccine made in the history of this country is 100% safe, and those are pro-vaccine people. And then there are the crazy anti-vaccine people. Vaccines, as Bobby Kennedy and many other people have described, are products. They have things in them. They have adjuvants. They have some have peanut oil. Some are in egg base. They're all kinds of things. These are products that need to be investigated with gold standard science. And what's happened now is that we've gone in less than a generation from 7 or 8 vaccines for the worst possible things to a time when a child born today is going to get 91 vaccines. And these have not been tested. The combinations have not been tested, because never in the history of this country have people gotten this many vaccines, this many untested vaccines. That's the problem. We need real science, not corporate science, meant solely to maximize profits and not to protect people's health.
Obviously, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did a pretty good job ticking off the military-industrial complex during his campaign with his positions on things like Ukraine and other things. And they're obviously pretty powerful. But if you were to talk about who was the next most powerful lobby behind that, I think a lot of people would say that it's probably Big Pharma. If you were to talk about the next most powerful lobby behind them, I think a lot of people would say it's Big Food. Big Pharma and Big Food stand to have their whole way of doing things reshaped under a Kennedy-led HHS. They have a lot of money, hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars together to spend on both campaign contributions and lobbying. How is RFK going to withstand the onslaught of Big Pharma, Big Food, and maybe the military-industrial complex on top of it?
Yeah, that certainly is going to be a tough one. And there's no question that, like you said, the junk food, the Big Pharma lobbyists, they're panicking. They're creating there was a Politico story saying that they're creating this war room that's incredibly well funded. They're going to do everything they can to prevent Bobby Kennedy from getting in a position where he can call out their corruption, where he can separate these big corporations, and end this corrupt merger of state and corporate power. And it's going to be a battle, and there's no question that it's going to be a battle. But he has the honesty, the integrity, the sincerity, the moral courage to fight this battle. And I don't think there's anybody else in this country who can fight this battle. And he's shown now for months and months and months that he can withstand hit pieces in every major newspaper, lies told about his personal life, just attacks of every conceivable kind. But he keeps coming back because he believes in the mission that he has. He believes in making this country healthy again, and he believes that he has to do it, that there's no alternative, and that, he is going to get this job done. And I think the other part of it is that the people in this country have changed. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, I don't think there were 5 million people in this country who were looking for the kind of change that he will represent. Now I think it's 150 million people. I think that they recognize that the health agencies are riddled with conflicts of interest. They recognize that nobody has been on their side. Nobody's been trying to protect them from the chronic disease epidemic that's taken over this country. And they see in Bobby Kennedy the possibility of change. And like I said before, they voted for that change, and they're going to demand that change. And I don't think any senator is going to want to get in the way of 150 million voters. And I think that those people are out there. So, clearly there's this revolution, there's this change. Even in New York City, 50% more people voted for Donald Trump and for the things that he said he was going to do, one of them being, empower Bobby Kennedy to get this work done. So I think if you believe in democracy, if you believe in the health of the American public, you're going to want this to happen. And people are just going to stand up and fight against this corruption, no matter how many billions of dollars they throw at it.
You had Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the former commissioner of the FDA under President Trump. He came out and said that RFK could cost this country lives if he goes forward and gets confirmed as HHS secretary. He said, quote, "You're going to see measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination rates go down. And like I said, if we lose another 5%, which could happen the next year or two, we will see large measles outbreaks." He's not alone. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, he labeled RFK Jr.'s nomination as medical malpractice on a mass scale. These are smart guys, Mike Bloomberg and Scott Gottlieb. How do you respond to critics who believe that RFK, what they believe is his anti-vaccine stance, disqualifies him from overseeing U.S. health policy?
The only reason that they believe that he's anti-vaccine is that the vaccine companies that are making billions of dollars at the expense of public health have told them to believe that. That's not what Bobby Kennedy represents. He's totally said, time after time, he's not anti-vaccine. He just believes that this has gotten out of control, that it needs to be studied, that we need gold standard science. There are governors and senators and congressmen all around the country who have come out and backed Bobby Kennedy. Governor Jared Polis from Colorado has said he's really excited at the possibility of Bobby Kennedy running HHS. There are a lot of people who are. And the point is that these corrupt people, these current people, have had their chance. And they have killed, they have taken action that have resulted in millions of deaths from chronic disease that were unnecessary. And so the worst possible fears that anybody could have had 20 or 30 years ago of literally, just large numbers of people dying of chronic disease, of overdoses, of, from the medical community, from the pharmaceutical companies, from the processed food companies. Those things have already happened, the worst possible fears. It's time now to look at it from a different perspective. The American people have voted for change. They want change. They're open to it. And they don't believe these people who are saying that he's dangerous. They know that it's time now to shake things up. It's time now to look at whether he's right. Why are so many people sick? Why are so many people dying? So you can tell these stories about what might happen if we don't give people 90 vaccines, 200 vaccines, 300 vaccines, if we don't drug all of our young children, if we don't stuff them with sugar and with, colorings and additives of all kinds, that we need the status quo or people are going to get sick. But it's ridiculous if you think about it, because, like I've said now a couple of times, all of those things have already happened. People are already getting sick. People are already dying. We need a different perspective. We need real science that's totally disconnected from these companies that are profiting at our expense.
Tony Lyons, we're going to have to end it there. It's always a thought-provoking discussion. You got to come visit us in studio next time, Tony.
Definitely.
Absolutely. If you want to comment on any portion of our discussion, feel free to do so. 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.